She hadn't jumped. Awesome. All right, the July 24th Park Township Planning Commission regular meeting is now in session. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes or recommended revisions that anybody would like to make?
Motion to accept as is.
Support. All in favor? Opposed? All right. Second item is the approval of minutes from June 26th. I have taken a look at it. I did not have any changes. Did anybody else have any they would like to recommend?
Minutes are excellent.
They are. Agreed. Thanks, Lorna.
There's a switch on the back.
Yes.
Sorry. Now, yes, I have
Okay.
two. One is on item 5, where I'm introducing myself. Fourth line down, where it says, and he's been on the board for 11 years. I read about incompatible offices, and I would like to make sure that emphasize I served on that board from 2003 to 2013, and no longer on that. So I don't get it.
Thanks for clarifying that. Did you have another one as well, or was it?
Yes. In item, well, it was when we were talking about that. I just wanted to say there's a line that says Bergen stated that he wants more information about vertical, and that needs to be agricultural vertical integration.
Okay.
That's page 11. About halfway.
Got it. All right, thanks, Dan. Any others? Seeing none, I would make a motion to accept as amended. Support. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Perfect. All right, next item on the agenda is public comment. Just some guidance on this. I know we have a number of folks here, and we have a couple of different items that we'll certainly we'll see comment on tonight. I would just ask for on the public comment portion of this. I know with the Point West amendment application, we'll have a public hearing. So if you have comments to make that are specific to that, please hold those until the public hearing. If you have comments on any of the other things that are on the agenda, which could include the preliminary plan or any other topics you'd like to discuss, now would be the time. So do we have anybody on the left that would like to make comments around that? No public comments? Okay. Seeing no hands, anyone on the right? I think I know why you're all here. All right. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and close the public comment. Public hearing we have an application for major amendment to the existing PUD for Point West. Mika, would you kind of like to set up where we are initially on this and what we're considering tonight, and then we'll open up the hearing.
Sure. So this is a major amendment to the Point West 1 development. This was approved right around 2011 in that neighborhood. And the portion that we're looking at was part of the open space. At the time, it was at that point also under private ownership. One of the things that we've talked about is that ownership, we're looking at the land use as opposed to the ownership. So a change in ownership, even though under the ownership of one private individual is a little bit unusual, it's not necessarily it's not barred. But that is something that's a little unusual. That the ownership of that property changed hands, and the new owner would like to make a number of splits to that property. They're not proposing a change in the use of the property, but it would be split between the landowners who are adjacent to that property. So it is a significant change in that way. So the questions, there are a few questions before the planning commission, including, and there are a couple questions as far as even part of this would be a little outside of the condominium. I'll have Dan speak to that if you wanna discuss that part further. But I think one of the main questions for the planning commission to think about is if this is still within the intent and purpose of what the open space would be. So I don't know how many of you had a chance to go out there. I did not get the gate code. I did ask for it. So I know that you may not have had a chance to see that. And if you decide that you'd like to go out and look at it at a later date, we can do that too. So.
Great, thank you. With that, we need a motion to open the public hearing.
Move that we open the public hearing.
Support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Public hearing's open. Yes, applicant, if you've got a representative, please, folks, as you come up to speak, if you could make sure you put your information down and then step up to the mic so we can all hear you. Thank you.
Mine as well.
Yes, it's
Okay.
good to have everything. There should be a sign-in sheet there.
Hi, my name is John Anders. I'm an attorney here in Holland at Rhodes McKee. I'm representing the owner here, who is Sherry Eldahan, the trustee of the Sherry Eldahan Trust. So as Mika mentioned, private ownership of this approximately 3.25 acre vacant land that is included in the PUD, but not included within the condominium. So it's a private horseshoe along this hillside. I've been working closely with Douglas Dahan, who's Sherry's husband. And I think there may have been some confusion on the front of this because of Douglas's day job. This property is not owned by Douglas's big business. It's not owned by Dahan Homes. It's not being proposed for development by Dahan Homes. It's actually a large vacant area that's behind their personal residence in the cottages at Point West condominium. So just by way of background and kind of how we got here, now that Dahans ended up taking ownership of the property, they were looking to build on one of the remaining units in the Point West condominium. And because of the size and shape of that unit, with what they were looking to do there, they needed a little bit more room from the vacant land adjacent to it. So when they reached out to the party that owned that vacant land, it was essentially, you can purchase this, but you're going to have the whole slice. So that's how they took ownership of this 3.25 acre horseshoe hillside. And since coming to own it, after getting everything permitted for the home, they've been developing a plan and working with the neighbors to redistribute this area that actually kind of serves as the backyard for the homes at the bottom of the hill and the backyard for the homes at the top of the hill. For close to 2 years, the Dahans have been working with the neighbors to kind of gauge interest and come up with a layout to reallocate portions of this large parcel. Right now, we've got it set up where there'll be 17 individual owners of how this is essentially allocated. Just to talk about what exactly this is. Since I'm a lawyer, I got to do from a purely legal perspective. What we're not talking about necessarily, and what we've talked to the township about, is not a split or a land division. It's actually distinct. It's a boundary line adjustment. So what that is we're not going in and saying we're going to create a bunch of standalone lots. What we're talking about is allocating areas of this area to existing homeowners. So essentially allowing those homeowners to grow portions of their backyard or side yards. We're not creating standalone buildable lots. We're trying to create some buy-in and ownership from those around it to preserve this open space and natural area, especially with respect to the critical dunes. Again, kind of stressing with the way that this has been structured, over several years, there are items like decks, retaining walls, and everything else that are in this area owned by the Dahans. And, a large part of this is a motivation to try to clean that up. Rather than going through multiple easement processes and everything else where these structures cross over boundary lines, it's essentially saying, hey, why don't we grow your yard so that the existing nonconformities can sort of remain in place? So what we're requesting here, how we got to this step before the planning commission is we were talking with Mika and Dan about this boundary line adjustment idea and allocation. And they said, well, because this area was included in the PUD back in 2011, as at that point it was called green space rather than open space. Under the current ordinance, it's going to require an amendment to the PUD. So here we're essentially asking for an amendment to the PUD to add these lines of ownerships to allow the boundary line adjustments. We're not asking for a change in the terms or the conditions of the PUD. We're not asking for any land to be pulled or removed from the PUD. We're not requesting any reduction in this green space or open space. All the restrictions that were imposed back in 2011 under this would stay in place. We're not trying to pull or remove or do anything with respect to that. We're really just trying to add some lines on a map. And I know it was a little late, but earlier this week we submitted what we're calling the illustrative plan. It's sort of an aerial that you have that shows how the lot lines of the adjacent owners to this would be extended through this piece. And that aerial sort of shows where their homes are at and where this horseshoe piece fits into place. So last item I have is I've got Greg right here from Niederveld, who was actually involved in the process of the PUD approval back in 2011. He's here to kind of give a brief overview of how exactly this green space was designated and treated back in 2011, and then to kind of answer maybe any historical questions that you may have.
Great, thank you.
Evening, Greg Rad with Niederveld. Yeah, I had the privilege of staying here for a number of years, actually. Dan's laughing. I think it was 3 or 4 years through the process, representing the original developer through it. So that would be helpful to give a little context on some pieces of that and what that is, because these are a bunch of new faces from that time, from when we did that. So one of the plans in the packet is this open space plan. And this open space plan was generated towards the end of the approval of the project. We had already gotten through all of the units and everything involved with the project, and the request was to generate an open space plan that met the requirements of the open space for the PUD. I personally commissioned this and worked with a team in our office to develop this, so I'm familiar with this particular plan. And if you look at this plan, talks about the whole 8 acres, but the open space requirement in part has to deal with gross usable area or gross usable acreage, specifically excluding steep slopes and other areas that are not buildable. And so this plan was one to demonstrate that the PUD met the requirements of open space, exceeded the requirements of open space actually by about 15%. It was 35%, almost 35% of open space, by the red dashed line that you see on the plan. It's a little faint, but there's a red dashed line around it. That was the required calculation for open space, and it met that. That's why the next phase down there says additional green space. It's because it was just additional land that was steep slopes, and there was nothing we could do with it anyway, very regulated by Eagle, and you're not going to build on it, you're not going to improve it at all. And so that gives a little bit more context to why maybe it's not even in the condominium. The Point West condominium is more on the base of the hill in that area. The Point West condominium does include the open space areas that were required for the PUD. And so that is a neighborhood ownership of that required area. This happens to be additional green space. I can't speak to what the original developer had in mind for that property. That they're not here. I'm not going to speak to any of that. But as Jonathan laid out, it's it's a unbuildable area because the Eagle regulates it from a critical dune standpoint. There's very strict requirements from tree trimming and rooting and all that. And furthermore, the township even has a preservation ordinance when it comes to that. But we felt it would be much better to allocate pieces of that to the adjacent owners. So this is not new parcels. This is just as Jonathan laid out. It's just rearranging some property lines to put that back to good use. So I'm here to answer any questions regarding the old time if we need to. So,
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, with that, I think we've got a number of folks who would like to speak, so we can start with the left.
I'm Randy Skipper. I'm representing the owners up the top of the hill, several of those owners at the top of the hill. I don't have anything to add to what they said. I just wanted to, if you have any questions that I can answer, I'll answer them, but I think they covered them.
But we'll have some questions, I think, for the applicant, but let's go ahead and folks that would like to speak, if they assume some of you might like to.
My name is Jim Juries. To establish some credibility, perhaps, I've been a developer in Park Township for my career, 25 years of my career. I developed approximately 400 lots or parcels in Park Township, including Marigold Woods, Spyglass, Lakewood Park, other smaller Hazelwood, Hazel Bank, I think it's called. I have lot or parcel number 25 on your map, if you have that, of the parcels of Point West and the land in discussion tonight. I back up to the big hill. I have information furnished to me by the township that there is somebody interested in purchasing the land immediately behind my condominium unit. And it would go up, I'm presuming that it's the person who lives at the top of the south, or rather North Hill, whose property lines equal mine at the bottom of the dune. I have several concerns. Number one, I have learned that that dune is very fragile. I bought my condominium there 2 years ago. The seller, thinking that that dune looked wild and unmanaged, pulled a lot of the vegetation for 25 or 30 feet up that dune, pulled it out, just got rid of it. Since then, that dune has started to erode onto my property. And if anybody is thinking that they're going to buy this and put a picnic area out there or clear it in any way for any reason, I'm frightened that that dune could be lost. It could come down on the units that back up to that piece of property. I have learned in my 25 years that you cannot anticipate what people will do on their land, including land such as this that's dedicated to the neighborhood. I experienced one home builder who went on to property dedicated like this and built a big tree house for his kids. And we had to require that it be torn down. He fought us. He finally, in anger, moved out of the neighborhood because even his neighbors didn't like him anymore. I had another one in our township. Dealer painted on his 2-stall garage door a forest and a big bear, which was a character coming from some sitcom in the 80s or 90s, promised he would take it down if I didn't like it. I didn't like it and he didn't do it. So you cannot imagine what people do or might do on these properties. So I'm very concerned about that. The developer is not here, but I'm going to address his representative attorney and ask that they would consider putting restrictions on this property that do not exist at this time. For instance, behind my house, that owner who could come down, probably too old to do it, but his kids or his grandkids could find that to be an easier way to get to the weed than walking down the road. They could be running up and down. Up would be difficult. Coming down would certainly be easy. I'd like to see that restricted, that he couldn't do that. I had a situation where somebody put our township maximum fence height is 6 feet. I had somebody fence their backyard and had dangerous dogs back there. And the dogs would, if the kids from the neighborhood would come near that fence, the dogs would get pretty dangerous. I would like to ask that people not be allowed to fence that property off or use it to escape from a longer walk somewhere else. That the dune is extremely fragile.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. I neglected to mention the 3-minute guideline, but it sounds like you're wrapping up. So
I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Good evening. I'm Douglas DeHaan, Sherry's husband, not a developer in this case. I'm an owner, spouse. I just want to make, not refute, not rebuttal, but I just want to have a few comments. I wasn't going to say anything, but after that last comment, I am going to say something. So I think it's really interesting. Years ago, when we went to build our home, we had a lot of restrictions around it. We had the redheaded stepchild lot. It's the one everybody parked on, dumped on, and everything else full of junk. And so, but it's one, we purchased it. We're going to build a dream home there. We had on our west side a 0 lot line. Naderveld said that this was a flex lot. It was an exception lot. It had a 0 lot line. Well, we presented a plan to the township with a 0 lot line, and the building inspector said, no, you have to have 3 feet. So we could have made our cottage 27 foot instead of 30 foot wide, but for the cost of the land, it seemed as though what we were trying to build was in line with what we were surrounded by. Well, the only thing that to the west of us was an easement with utilities. So we had an electric box and a cable box. So I went to the Van Andel family and said, can we buy a 90 by 90 by 90 triangle? That's it. After 3 weeks, Katie Donaldson called back and said, I got good news and bad news. The good news is we'll sell you the corner, but the bad news is we're going to give you 3.5 acres with it. Good luck. We closed in 2 weeks because we were anxious to go with our home. And over that next 6 to 7 months, I started to meet owners. I have emailed and mailed every owner, including Mr. Jury's twice. He had a chance to buy it. So we can talk about controlling it, but he had a chance to own it. Mr. Van Andel for 60 years did nothing with the property. Okay. We've owned it for 2. We've done nothing. We get calls when a tree drops. We get calls when a branch drops. We get calls. So 2 weeks ago, we get a call at 5 in the morning. Hey, a tree dropped in the entry. No one can get into Point West. Okay, here we go. So we're launching, folks. I get it. It's in that area. There's old telephone poles, trees, everything else. It needs to be managed. It needs to be procured. It needs to be taken care of. Okay. We are not interested in 3.5 acres of old vegetation and woods. Okay. It's a lot of responsibility. So, and going with the neighbors, it was very interesting because I sat at everyone's kitchen table and had a meeting with them. And I heard comments like, we've wanted to buy this for years. We wanted an opportunity to buy it. We've got invasive Russian olive growing in our deck. We've got a tree hanging over our house. We have this, we have that. There are 4 decks that will go, are over the property line into this property. There's 2 clients that have non-conforming walls that are into this property from a landscape standpoint. Macatawa Park Association, Cottage Association said, we'd love to have the ownership of our roads. So Mr. Van Andel maintained the ownership of these roads. So there's been beach issues, there's been road issues, there's been easement issues. Mr. Walvert is sitting behind me. We own a piece of property that is in front of his driveway. When I went to talk to him, he said, you wouldn't fence me off from my driveway and just give me 15 foot. I said, no, we're going to put this together and make an agreement. Mr. Dirk Walcott is next door, the same thing. It's an unusual, weird piece. It should have been dealt with by the Van Andel family. How they owned it personally and didn't do anything, don't know. We inherited it. We're trying to fix it. We're trying to clean this up. And I think we're doing a really good job. It's taken us 2 years to get here, to talk to folks, work out some kind of amiable agreement. But between, quite honestly, the legal, the engineering, and everything that we've invested into this, we're just looking to get out of it. And it's not a developer trying to get wealthy. It's someone that's trying to say, can we do the right thing with the property? There's a lot of non-conforming issues here that'll be fixed. Macatawa Park gets roads, Point West gets roads. I met with the Drain Commission and Road Commission. There's 4 standing storm sewers on this property that tie into the Point West system. Why would anyone want to own a public sewer or public storm sewer? So this is an issue where it's a green space. It's governed by the DEQ or Eagle. I'm sorry. It tells what you can do with the dune. You can't build a stairway. Okay, handheld. You can't do a deck. You can't do a tree house. It's highly restrictive. I do this for a living. Okay, the state park can take a bulldozer down it in the fall. You can't take a shovel full 2 doors north. Okay, I get it. That's the restrictions we work with.
Thank you.
But I just want to speak to this, that we have tried very, very hard to get it to this point. We think it's a responsible plan.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. Any other comments to be made? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Marty Bingham. I'm one of the 17 North Hill owners that would look down on this property. And I guess I just asked for the Planning Commission to think about a few things away from this purchase, but more for the new 17 owners. There's taxes that are going to come with this. There's liability. There's upkeep to the green space. And there's no fire hydrants. There's no public utilities within the framework. There is within the PUD, but when you get up on the North Hill, there's a lot of lack of public utilities that could be utilized in the case of fire and safety. What I mean by that is there's no fire hydrants up there. There's no city water. Everybody pays a lot of money in taxes. So as new 17 owners of this new PUD, I guess I asked the commission to think about the utilizing of that space to put in some form of safety. It's a lot of people paying a lot of money for 1 to 2 month cottages. Don't vote, don't utilize the township as much as they can, but the one thing they could utilize is fire and safety help. So that's all. On behalf of the owners, potential owners, I just want you to think about that. So thank you.
Thanks. Any further comments? All right, with that, I'd like a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. I had a lot of questions looking at this, and I suspect that there were some that came up, and I think just to make a few opening comments, and then I'll open it up to to our committee members. One of the first things I looked at when I saw this was, what's the why? What's changed? And I think I've gotten some pretty good context around that in terms of some of the concerns around the dunes. I know that, and Dan, maybe I'll ask you to speak about this as well in terms of how the dunes can be used. As Mika opened up, we don't determine ownership. What we do determine or we have to consider is use. And so as we think about the use of this property in the dunes, how would that change? My read in PUDs that we've gone through is that public space or open space is supposed to be available for everybody to use essentially equally. So one question I had is, how would that change in this type of situation? Because this means that the open space now would be not subdivided, but rebounded, if you will, to the individual homeowners. So that's one question I have, and certainly can provide additional context. I think in terms of how that dune can be used, how that property can be used, you commented, I think, about the Eagle requirements around that. It is not buildable. And I think we had talked a little bit about how that property or how that space could be used as open space. And Dan, maybe you can make some comments around that if you would.
Sure, I'll make a couple of comments. The first question, when we talked about open space and public space, it has never been, well, I shouldn't say never. My understanding is in the original plat from 1881, it's identified as Hotel Park and Prospect Park.
Right.
So that there are a bunch of different parks there. It was, however, on private ownership at some point in time by one person or family who subsequently sold it to its current owners. So it's been in private ownership for some time. And Randy can probably tell you that for at least 50 years, there's been a lot of litigation involved in this area that keeps real estate attorneys busy, probably some engineers too. And so it's a very litigious type of area. How one person came to own a park, I don't know. But when you own property, you have a bundle of sticks that are certain property rights. One of the sticks in your bundle of sticks is the right to exclude other people from coming on your property unless they have an easement for ingress, egress, that type of thing. And so this idea that it's an open public space, I don't think that was true in the PUD when it was approved in 2011. Okay. I think Mr. Anders indicated it's green space, not open space. To suggest that it's going to maintain its green preserved nature, but it's not a common area for everybody to come to and picnic.
Got it. Okay.
The second issue is what can be done with it. As indicated, it's in a critical dune area, so the state regulates that item. However, even though the state regulates it, you could impose conditions on top of the state that basically says, in the event the state decides to eliminate Eagle or change Eagle's name or whatever, but it disappears, those regulations disappear, the township can impose conditions, basically saying no building, no construction, etc. So you could impose that condition, even though there's a state regulation already, just to kind of do a belt and suspenders type of approach.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that clarification. I guess the other question I would have, and this is something it sounds like, and I'd like to understand a little bit more about the neighbors around that would be taking on a portion of this. Certainly there would be tax impact. And I guess is it unanimous at this point? And if it isn't, what would happen to any of those areas that are not in the plan for purchase by the current owners of the condominiums?
So I will say to the unanimous, I think is a bit loaded. I will say that everybody that abuts it to some extent, as Douglas mentioned, he met with them, had an opportunity to talk with them about the project. Some have elected to purchase a share, others have not.
Okay.
We envision it as those purchasing their share of it as being the stewards of that space moving forward. And would just kind of like to piggyback off of maybe what part of Dan said is I can't maybe stress enough some of the severity of the steepness of this slope. It's not, your typical PUD open space pool recreational field. It was never, I think, intended to be that. I don't want to speak for the folks that did it back in 2011, but I think it was just a way of designating area that would never really see any physical development due to that slope. And again, here we're not suggesting that anything would change in that respect. And as I understand it, if anybody were to try to build here, they've got to come back before planning commission because it'd be another amendment to the PUD.
Mr. Chair, if I could address your question regarding taxes.
Please.
My understanding from the assessors, because this is all non-buildable area, it's going to have a minimal impact on any tax adjustment to properties when we adjust the boundary lines.
Okay, great.
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. I
Thank
think that was the main question of it. So I guess my original question that I was going to ask, and I think it's been answered in a couple of cases, but I'd like to understand a little bit more on this. It sounds like there's enough, I'll call it hardships or challenges with some of the non-conforming property, but also some of the things like invasive species and things like that that are close to people's homes, but are part of that space. But I guess, my first question was, if maintaining that space, and I know it's an important space to maintain, is really what's going to be able to be done with it. Nothing else really is going to be able to be done with that dune, with that space that would be part of these. As a homeowner, I guess if I thought about it from my perspective, and if I had the opportunity to purchase property that was owned by someone else that I would then be paying for and really couldn't do much with other than enjoy it the way I am today, what would be that motivation? And we got a lot of emails from folks that were not supportive of this. I think the motivation for their emails were thinking that it could be developed, or thinking it would add to density, or it would change the character of the environment. I wouldn't see this as being that, but I don't know if I've got a question on this. If you've got any additional context around folks that are interested in purchasing this, and maybe, I think you've got a representative here of.
The primary reason I hear from my clients why they want to own this property is because they want to be able to make sure somebody else doesn't clear cut it.
Right.
Somebody else doesn't develop it. They will not be able to build their own homes on it. They won't be able to add on to their homes down the hill, not just because it's critical dune, but there's also a platted right of way between their lots and this hillside that, while it'll all be under common ownership, they can't build over the platted right of way. So, and we're not going to go through the whole plat amendment process, believe me. Life is too short for that. So the platted roadway will still technically be there, and that would be in effect when it comes to zoning. So they just want to make sure other people aren't going to be cutting trees down. And Eagle says you can cut trees as long as you leave the roots and the root base. Well, we don't want that to happen. So that's why my people want to own it. They know they can't build on it, but they want to be able to keep people from damaging the property that's critical to their homes.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing.
Sure.
I think maybe part of it into what you spoke about being a homeowner. I think some people view it as, okay, if it's in my backyard, it's my responsibility to take care of it. And I think we've got a group of buyers that view this as very much the same way. Rather than calling one person that may or may not do something about something that happened in an area that you mentioned, I can sit out and look at it right now. Nothing's going to change. If it's in their section, they can take care of a fallen tree. They can manage the invasives versus trying to get one person to do it.
Great. Thank you. All right, I'll be quiet and pass the torch here to others that may have some questions or comments.
Mr. Chair, at the beginning, I had no rationale as to why people would do this. Then I thought, well, what about property rights and ownership? And I think I've heard from the group that the reason that they want to do it is to ensure that it stays in the upkeep condition that they want to enjoy in their PUD. So gotten a little better understanding. I also feel a little bit better when Dan explained that the township can ensure that MDNR or Eagle restrictions on exploiting the dune in any way can transfer to the township if Eagle, for some reason, no longer has purview over that area. So it looks to me that if we made some considerations with regard to ensuring that those provisions were adopted, that this would be something valuable to the property owners.
Thank you. Stephanie, how about your thoughts?
I agree, with what Dennis just shared. Was also curious as to the motivation and understanding, I would definitely be in favor of having the township impose restrictions. Just given where we are, who's to say that Eagle will maintain all of the power that they do have, where, you know, things won't change. So given the intent here, I think it would be important for us to give specific consideration and be deliberate in what we're intending to achieve with those restrictions.
Thank you. Dave.
Yeah, I got a couple questions. One, is there something in the bylaws of the PUD that governs the use or maintenance of that open space?
Sorry.
Is there something in the bylaws of the PUD that governs the use and maintenance?
So I guess maybe there I need to take a step back. The PUD and the condominium are two different things. So I think as maybe Greg alluded to earlier and possibly Dan, this section is not in the condominium.
Okay.
So it's not subject to their bylaws and everything else. It's in the PUD for a zoning perspective. And there, back in 2011, if you go back through the minutes and everything, the resolution that adopted the PUD for this area, there's a report. And there's a section of that report. It's actually got items listed. It's section 3. And in items A through V, it lists all the conditions that have already been imposed on this. So rather than a set of bylaws, there's this, it's the PUD restrictions that the township already put in place.
Okay, good. So then the follow-up to that is the new potential owners, would there be something in a buy-sell agreement with those same terms and conditions that holds them?
So the PUD ordinance that's already in place, it's called running with the land. It runs with the land. It's recorded, it's available, it's there in perpetuity. So there's actually a provision in that document that says it follows successor owners. So if somebody were to purchase into this in a few years, they're going to be bound by this, just like it has been since 2011.
Okay, good, thank you. That's it, thanks.
Shark?
I got some extremely random comments I wrote down. They may apply, they may not apply. The gentleman that stood up and spoke on the Hill with wanting a little bit more safety. I don't understand why that wasn't in the original plan with sewer and water, that it be in place. And that's just a general comment. It seems there have been already people who have done things on this green space that shouldn't have done things. You mentioned overhanging decks. And I don't know if there's play areas and other things, but I don't know, Mika, have those types of items been approved to be non-conforming in the past?
No idea. Several of those things like retaining walls, we don't require any permitting. We don't require permitting for child play structures. So a deck could have been built without a permit that should have been permitted, but anything else would not.
Yep. So along with the theme of you cannot predict what people will ever do, ever. We learned that with short-term rentals. You can't predict what the next generation of owners of the home units will do either. And nobody from the township drives around to see what our residents are doing. We're not watching retaining walls, we're not watching decks, we're not watching auxiliary units being built either. Because people are people and they're not gonna get permits sometimes. I don't think by changing boundaries, well, maybe by changing boundaries, these items that have already been occurring will now be legal because that will be on their property, but that's kind of a shady way of going about that. My one question I did write, how does the entire community right now utilize that green space? Or are they not allowed to utilize it?
So a couple of things I think that are interesting here. There are no playgrounds on this property, okay? The decks are probably 60 years old. So you have to go back to the turn of the century when this was surveyed in a dune with chains and a stick. Today they use GPS. Holland engineering is different than native engineering. It's, as Dan said, it's a litigious area up there, okay? This is the one time that both communities have come together and come to an agreement, which is absolutely shocking, but it's wonderful, okay? To your comment about it's shady, it's not shady. This corrects non-conforming structures. There are people that have had homes for 3 and 4 generations, okay, that have this property. They wanted this property. If you got a big tree hanging over your deck, you got a dead one that fell against 2 live ones, people can't touch it. I'm probably not supposed to say this, but I'm going to say it. But there was someone that took care of a tree that was over their deck that was sued by the prior owners of this property for $50,000. Everyone was scared spitless to do anything with this property, procure it, manage it, kill weeds, anything. No one's touched it. Well, it needs to be procured. You need to take care of trees. You need to take care of branches. You need to take care of vegetation. And my wife and I looked at it and said, we're not going to, but we have 18 people that want to. These people want to take care of property that have adjoined their property that for 60 years couldn't touch it. And in the last 15 years, were scared legally not to touch it. So anyone that I sat down with is thrilled to be able to take care of the property and manage it responsibly. And I will share with you right now, these 18 people that we've met, and some of these cottages have been in the family for 100 years, are going to do a much better job procuring it than what my wife and I are. Because I don't have an interest in managing 3.5 acres. Okay. If we put it in a conservative, they would put a fence around it because they don't want the liability. These folks wouldn't. So when Mr. Jury says we can't have a fence around it, well, a conservancy would. So to keep it in its natural state, to give it back to the people who have wanted it for years, we think is the right thing to do. And I think it will be managed, procured, and I think your forestry and your vegetation on the dune will be much healthier when these people take care of it. Okay. The piece behind Mr. Jury's house is a piece he owns. Behind those condominiums, it goes up halfway up the hill. So the plants that they pulled is on the property that they own. It wasn't a neighbor. Mr. Bingham that spoke about the sewer and the water is above Mr. Jury's house. So, but everyone's very, we have people that we've allowed to plant ferns. We've allowed, they're starting a growth program. We're allowing people to start to take care of the property, even though we own it. That's how considerate they are. So,
Thank
okay.
you for your perspective.
Additional background. Dan, you asked how I got private ownership. This land was platted in 1888 as a private park for Macatawa. In 1935, Park Township recorded Henneville supervisor's plat, and I called it, instead of a park, lot 14. That made it open for development. It became a developable piece of land at that point. Well, nearly not at that point. It became developable when nobody challenged that for 40 years. By 1975, then anybody could have built on this property. Here we sit 140 some years after it was platted, and it's still not built on. It's not built on partly because physics, partly because people want to keep it undeveloped. People aren't looking to put playgrounds or fences or anything else like that. They're looking to preserve it as it was originally intended in the 1888 plat. as a park benefiting the surrounding property owners. This will really put it back to what was intended when it was originally platted.
Thank you.
Sure, any of there.
I have nothing right now.
All right,
Nothing further, I should say.
thank you. Len?
Mr. Chairman, a lot of thoughts going back and forth. I think why you want to do it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I totally understand that. The restrictions that could be imposed, I'm concerned because that's not monitored. And I live in a PUD, 7 houses, and how we all interpret how we take care of properties is very, very different from one another. And I've seen, so even if you do invasive species, take a topic like that, somebody may say, well, that's fine. I don't care if it grows over here behind my property. Somebody else may say, I really do care what that looks like behind my property. And everybody's going to interpret that much differently. So I think you'd have to have some very strict, you'd have to have some restrictions, but I have no idea how that would be monitored. And it would actually, is it neighbors monitoring each other? And by the way, if that happens, there's going to be people that don't agree with that. And so I've seen it happen in my PUD where I live. I actually, the property next to me, somebody got all the approvals. They went into a dune and they just scraped out all of the dune and they used it for fill on their house. Nobody here knew what was going on. And I look at my back door and I look at this dune that somebody did just what they wanted to do. Nobody knew about it. And so those are the things that I see that are reality that cause a lot of concern on my part.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple things.
Mhm.
One is to clear up some confusion in my mind. We've got a condominium association at the bottom of the hill, correct? Point West. We've got this park that is in no association. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And if I could just add, it's not a park. I think as it was mentioned earlier, it was green space, but never dedicated as public or
Green
open space.
In association.
Correct.
But the people at the top of the hill are in
In the
association.
Bag Tower Park Association.
So these.
Oh.
The whole place is Macatawa Park. Macatawa Park Association, it's a voluntary association. People don't have to be members of Macatawa Park Association. Of the 200 cottagers, most of them are. This land is the same as the cottages. It's not regulated by Macatawa Park Association because that's a voluntary association. It is regulated by your PUD. It is regulated by your township ordinance. It is regulated by ECO.
So if a broad, I'll call it a broad tax parcel is created, it's partly in the green space and partly in an association. What does that, how, I sort of.
It might be a question.
How do you have, right, are you changing your own?
I think that might be a question for Township's legal counsel. It happens quite a bit where you have a parcel that's partially in one designation and partially not.
But it also happens that a lot of homes and associations, like Dennis and mine, we live in an association. If you want to add on to a house, you have to go get association approval. This isn't that type of association. This association doesn't have any ability, architectural approval or like that over the homes, over the lots. Macatawa Park Association handles the private roads, the beach, those things, the common areas. It doesn't regulate the homes. It's not what's going to stop somebody from building on the hill. What's going to stop that is your PUD in place that already says you can't develop that hill. And the physics of the slope and the eagle. I mean, those things are all in places. They have been for the last, since 1888. No one's built on this.
So the green space is its entirely separate tax parcel that pays no HOA dues to anybody. There's no fees beyond property tax.
If I can interject, I apologize.
Absolutely.
So what Mr. DeHaan will tell you is a portion of the property that he bought is in the Point West One condo project. in order to build the house that he wanted to build on that unit, which was the remainder unit, which was a flex unit that was relatively unique, it might be the only situation in the township that it's been done in 2011, 4 Point West 1. In order for him to build on it, he needed a small little piece. In order for him to acquire that piece, the property owner required him to buy 3.5 acres, which is this green space. Because that little piece he needed was part of that green space. That green space is not within the Point West 1 condo. It is within the Point West 1 PUD. It won't be in the PUD, it won't be in the Point West 1 condo, it won't be part of any like homeowners association restrictions. That will still be in the PUD. The land use regulations over it will be the PUD and Eagle regulations. And so it becomes important to understand the difference between land use regulation through zoning, our PUD conditions, and ownership. And ownership can be done through condos, it can be done through land divisions, boundary adjustments, as is being proposed here. What they're doing in this application isn't changing the use in any way, it's changing the boundary and who owns what.
So the 6 prospective owners that would buy and are currently in the condo association, will that entire parcel be in the condo association?
No, it should not, because they're not gonna be able to expand the condominium. I don't believe Point West 1 PUD had a condo that was an expandable condominium. Furthermore, state law in the Condominium Act, and I'll trust Randy to check me, would basically say if you had an expandable condominium, you would have a time frame within which you would have to notice that you're expanding it, and that time frame cannot exceed 6 years. So it would have had to have been expanded prior to 2017, 2018. And so as a result, if people purchase additional backyard, the front yard will be within the Point West 1 condominium, and the backyard will be within the Point West 1 PUD, but not part of the condo project.
So my second question. If you expanded your backyard, have the limits of your build been moved along with the border? In other words, have your setbacks just changed?
The answer to that would be yes, but again, there's the issue, as Randy described it, physics, that would prevent people from building there. There's the Eagle restrictions, and the township could impose additional
But
restrictions.
actually, again, I don't think we can change the buildable footprint, as you mentioned. We're not changing the condominium. As I interpret your zoning ordinance, you're going to measure the setback from the edge of the condominium. Not from the edge.
From the edge of the backyard.
So the extra backyard remains unbuildable. It's too
I
long.
know, but the question I was asking was, could somebody buy that slope and then build all the way to the toe of that slope?
Sure, I've got a 40-foot rear yard setback. I just go up the hill, my setback line just got kicked way up the hill, so I can go 40 feet back on the flatland. I think the answer is no. I think under your zoning ordinance, you measure the setback from the edge of the condominium unit. And that's not changing.
That would be true at the bottom of the hill, but not at the top. For the units for the homes that are at the top of the hill, who are purchasing that additional property behind, that setback would then be changed.
No.
You'd still be limited. If you're right from the yard line, it would.
Be just as a bluff walk. The bluff walk is still there, and you measure from the edge of the right of it.
And I think it's probably also worth knowing that so this is already regulated under the PUD and all those restrictions. So for purposes of setbacks, nobody's going to be looking to reach into this area because they can't develop in it anyways. So I don't know if the concern is somebody saying, I've got a larger rear setback, I can do more with my home. I don't think that they could utilize that area as it stands under the current zoning ordinance and the PUD anyways.
Yeah, and I think what you were indicating is not so much that they would build in the green area itself, but they would use the open green area to give them more room to build elsewhere by having a larger setback. If that makes sense, in other words, if you had a setback that required 25 feet and you were right now 25 feet to the lot line, if you bought 100 feet, you could build further.
I think to Randy's point, so condominium boundaries at the bottom prohibit that. And to Randy's point with respect to the platted right of way bluff walk, that's again going to be, if there is any incremental gain there, it's going to be very small to where I can't imagine it has a material impact.
Very good questions.
So does that mean that if somebody wanted to do an ADU and build that at the back of their unit, you now, that boundary's moved further back, so there's now space for ADUs to go in there?
If the boundary line were moved back, we'd have to look at it at a more of a parcel by parcel basis to see how much that moved, but potentially it could increase the space. You do still have the practical limitations of the site. But if there is a change in the lot line, so, and I don't have the map right in front of me, but if you've got parcels whose edges are at the very top and you move them to the very bottom and their setback was previously here. Now, that could work in a couple different directions. Mac Park has an overlay district that allows for rear yard averaging. And so I think that could go in a lot of different directions. It might be a little bit difficult to predict without looking at it on a parcel by parcel basis.
And the other thing that I would add is that any proposal or desire to build anything would come back to us. So.
Well, within, if it were within the green space,
Within
if
the
it were
green
just a
space.
shift in the parcel line that changed what that setback would be, then that would probably most likely be an administrative office approval.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point, anything's going to be require a building permit and plans, and
Yeah.
the township will have it.
Right.
Whether it's an opportunity to look at it, whether it's the full group or Miko.
And then the last thing I'll say is I express a double down on the concern here of going to 15 people and having them agree on best practices on a critical dune is a little scary.
Sure. I will just say, so Eagle, from a state perspective, regulates this critical dune. If you're going to be doing anything that impacts that critical dune, you've got to go to Eagle, submit your vegetation plan, and ask for a permit. We provided a letter from Phil Johnson, who sort of specializes in this area, and he attached sort of the Eagle framework for what's regulated, what's not, what needs a permit, what do I need to get my permit. And, to the extent that the township is maybe uncomfortable if Eagle were to somehow go away, I think we've seen it in the past where the township on a municipal level says we adopt the Eagle plan and moves that moving forward. So essentially it mirrors what's already there, but you have the opportunity to serve as the local municipal backstop in addition to the state agency. But I will say, it's maybe to one of those earlier comments about how does this get enforced? I will say, in an area such as this, especially in this particular world of MacTow and the surrounding area, neighbors talk, and somebody's doing something that they don't feel is right. Complaints are going to be filed, whether it's with the township or the state. And I know that I work in a different world where I see a lot of that stuff maybe more repeatedly, but I can assure you that it does happen. And people will go to Eagle, make a complaint, and they have an enforcement division. So.
Park District employed for going on 40 years because of that.
All right, thank you.
One weird thing, you mentioned the question, what happens if Eagle gets dissolved? What happens if the critical dune law gets dissolved? The critical dune law was originally adopted with a premise that townships could adopt critical dune rules. And if they didn't, Eagle was the fallback. Well, two townships adopted critical dune laws. They both got sued. They both repealed them and left it to Eagle. But it's still there. The township could, anytime it wants, adopt a law regulating critical dunes if Eagle ceases to do it. The state law still provides that. If they were to go away, you'd have reason to do it.
Thank you. Dan, any additional comments on that?
Yes. So that thought had been going through my mind because the reason, and I think Park Township might have adopted them at one time, you don't, because you don't want to get sued for the regulatory taking. Here, I'm not so concerned about that because it's not the situation where somebody has what could otherwise, in a sense, be a buildable lot. These are situations where people already have cottages and they've had cottages on this property for 60 to 100 years. And what they're doing is seeking to acquire ownership over what is green space, unbuildable space, universally acknowledged by all the parties is unbuildable space. And so if you impose that restriction, I don't see them or future owners coming back on you saying, hey, we can't use the property as zoned, because they're already using the property as zoned. They want this, so they have the authority to properly maintain the dune area.
Okay. I think, and you probably know this much more than I do, but I believe, and that, I think what you're referring to is the environmental planners document. Very helpful. I think this is, it's part 353 from Public Act 451 that refers back to this. And I am not a legal scholar, nor am I a public act scholar. But I don't know, Dan, if the approach, and I'll take your guidance on this as well, if an approach might be to adopt that, I'd love to go through it and understand everything that's in it. But the standards around vegetation, maintaining the dunes as part of that, that might be a way to be able to support that as a.
Correct. When we met before coming to the planning commission for proposed PUD amendment, there was talk about the forestry plan, because the whole concept behind this is to maintain the health of that dune.
Right.
And having that universal plan that everybody would enforce, rather than one person doing it and being responsible for 3.5 acres, people are responsible for their own backyard.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I've got one more.
Yes.
So, overwhelmingly, all the emails that came in were, all the emails except for one were against going forward with this. I'd be interested to know if those individuals that had written to us may see things differently after hearing some of this discussion, or if that's still their stance that they oppose this. It was just interesting to me that of all the email, there was only one in support.
And I believe, because I have copies of all of them, it looked like the primary concerns were around change in environment, change in character, increase in density, potentially building on it. Potentially additional traffic if there was more building. Because I've gone through and made notes on each of these. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers the majority of these.
Correct. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to know if their stance would have changed by listening to dialogue.
I can't answer that. I don't think you're asking me to.
No, it changed my mind. That would be workable.
Very silent.
Normally, it's not a give and take, but in this case, we're learning a lot, and I appreciate the education. I think Dan's
I
providing.
got about 7 or 8 phone calls myself when I
Okay.
met with neighbors. I think the way the letter was sent out, and I'm not disputing that. The way it was sent out is it looked like it was being divided to develop.
Okay.
And I think now what people understand is, or at least today, what our goal is to say, the ownership changed, but not the use. And I think people looked at it when they see lines, they look at it like there's more lots. There are no more lots. It's just boundary lines. So I worked through that all last weekend. So I think a lot of those folks that wrote those are the ones that stopped by our house. So.
Thank you. So I'll just ask the question in general. Are we in a position where we are ready to make a motion or take a position on this at this point? It sounds like we've got support and also some questions.
I think that I'd like to see a little bit more information around the restrictions and what those might look like. So I think we're talking in generalities right now. And so this other governing organization, I'd like to see kind of what they have and what else might we add to that. I think that becomes really important for me to understand.
I would agree.
I have a question, maybe for the audience and the residents there. Would those 15 owners be willing to create an association and adopt the rules, the standards they're being bandied about?
First of all, there already are rules in place. There's the PUD that was adopted in what, 2009, 11, has restrictions on what can happen in this area. So there are already rules. Dan probably has those available. You may have those. And we don't see, we're not asking to have those changed. So those stay in place. As far as, you know, would we form an association, my clients and Mr. DeHaan form an association? We have not even discussed that. We have discussed working together on a forestry plan so that we can maintain, trim trees, maintain the health of the forest so that it stays healthy and stays both as a buffer and a healthy buffer without creating a fire hazard to our properties. But we haven't formalized it, the idea of an association per se, just the idea that we want to work together to hire a forester to come up with that kind of planning.
My question is more protecting the future successors on that property of adopting the same attitudes towards the new. If there is a legal association that adopts whatever this forestry plan it's up to be, that would give it some teeth going in the future.
Well, again, there's already teeth in the PUD requirements.
Right.
Those are binding law. We're not asking to have that binding law changed.
My recommendation, the PUD restrictions that you impose, and you can impose additional conditions on the amendment. Those restrictions allow the township to enforce those restrictions against the property owners.
Right.
An association is between property owner and property owner. The township's not involved in that at all. If they form an association and people were violating the rules, back at Town Park, people are gonna raise an issue, but there's nothing that the township could do about it. If you want additional conditions such as a particular forestry plan, you can impose that on any approval. I should say the board can impose it on any approval. You could recommend that to the board so that the township ultimately could go to court to enforce the environmental restrictions that the township wants to see enforced. But if it's an association that's created, the township's entirely out of it.
To make that recommendation to the board, would we, I would think we would need to detail to some degree what those specific restrictions would be.
Yes, I agree, and as indicated by Mr. Skipper and Mr. Anders, there's talk about preparing a forestry plan. One of the things that the planning commission could do, if you were so inclined, is to table or postpone this matter and request that they prepare a forestry plan that the 15 property owners, in a sense, could live with. Bring that back to you for your review, and then you could be making a recommendation to the board. That's a possibility.
Okay, I've heard from this side. I'm gonna go back over here. What are your thoughts based on everything?
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add? Anything new? Anything additional? Dennis?
The only thing that I would like to see is I'd like to see staff draft what would be required to ensure that we, as a township, have the authority that Eagle now has to preserve and protect the dune. I would like it to be in concert with whatever action we take on the proposed amendment.
So you're looking for. So a forestry plan from the applicant and then something that we would draft. And what do you, tell me, say a little bit more about what the content of that is that you'd like to see.
I'd like to see the township take the initiative to put something in law that we have. If Eagle goes away, we have the right to enforce the regulations that are currently overseen by Eagle.
Gotcha, okay.
And I think we could use the Eagle, just looking at that part 353, we could use that, I think, as a starting point, as a guide. I think you probably got most of the restrictions and the guidelines in there that we would want to see, but.
Yeah, I want to
Mr.
Mr. Martin on that because that gets really, really technical. We've got the quick,
Yeah.
353 and there's some basic stuff. The other regulations go pretty deep, so we'll look at something together and then see what we can bring back to you and see how that looks. Unless you have further comments.
That's fine with me. And again, you may or may not want to shift some of the burden onto the applicants and their attorneys. So, and I know you have an escrow.
Right.
But that way you're not paying me to do it.
I do think I think the idea of having that in place is important. I do think that it's important that you take that on initially because it is going to be your residents that are going to commit to that. I think that's a great starting point. I think once that's done, getting it back over to Mika to take a look at, I think would be a good plan. But I think that would be a very good plan.
Sure. And I might just like to add for context too, we're not talking about conditions on top of conditions that already exist. So the conditions from 2011 that were imposed, one of them is so broad as the project shall comply with all federal, state, and or Ottawa County laws, rules, regulations, or requirements. Right. So that's already incredibly broad.
And it's intentionally so. The reason for what they're talking about now is in the event the federal government abolishes the Environmental Protection Agency, the state abolishes Eagle, and there's no state or federal or county regulations in the critical goods area. The township wants to make sure that for this PUD, there are dune regulations in place at the township level.
Correct.
So I understand it correctly. It would be with just respect to this property, not a general ordinance that the township would adopt.
Draft a general ordinance, and I don't want the township to draft a general ordinance, but with respect to this PUD, so I guess I would go slightly broader than just this property. It would be a condition upon the amendment of the PUD.
Okay, understood.
Thanks. So with that, I think at this point, what we're leaning to is tabling this until we are able to get that in place and have a chance to be able to review it. I'm getting the sense that there's support, but we want to make sure that things are in place to be able to protect the dunes as all of you want to do and why you're making this commitment to be able to do that. But also make sure that we have the right things in place to be able to support that going forward. So I'll just throw that out, and if somebody wants to make a motion, I would entertain that.
I will move to go ahead and table this topic until we can obtain the forestry plan that will be put into place by the applicant. With also documentation of consensus of all the bordering property owners that they are going to agree to. And what else can we add that we talked about?
Mika? The plan, I don't know what to call the plan.
I don't know what to call the plan.
And why don't we say the environmental regulations plan?
Okay. That that be also in conjunction with your forestry plan looked at. And not override Eagle, but complement it.
Can we boil that down? You got it?
Yeah.
You got it? Okay.
Dan's good.
Dan's smiling over there.
He's not, so he's just laughing.
And I support. We have support? Yep. Okay. All in favor of tabling this until we have the environmental plan? Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, carries. Thank you. Thank you for all of your input. That was incredibly helpful. As you commented, we have some new folks up here. It's, we're being educated as well.
You know, when the reason for me asking my question.
Okay.
We are still in there was a little bit in the narrative.
Hey guys, we are still in session. Wait for folks to take it.
Well, I think they started. I'm like,
Folks, we're still in session. Could you please take the conversation out?
Can we take a 2-minute break or 3-minute break?
Sure, I'm up for it. We're going to recess for 5 minutes.
That's right. Good here.
Things are going.
Could have gold your mouth, right?
Yeah, awesome.
You don't hear much about that anymore.
Nobody ready to go? Let's bring our meeting back into session. Next, and thank you for that conversation. Good input, good discussion. I think it was helpful for all of us to learn a little bit of the history, and I think that was helpful and productive. So next item on the agenda is the preliminary PUD presentation for Foxglove. Mika, you want to kind of set us up on this, and then we'll ask for the applicant to present.
Yep, so as you mentioned, this is a preliminary review. That means that there's not a public hearing for this one. This is really an opportunity for the planning commission to take a look at the plan. I can either say, make a couple changes and come back to us again before going past the preliminary stage, or say, you know, this is our feedback, and come back to us when you're ready to apply for final approval. This is for a proposed development of single-family homes on the south side of Holland. It's probably the only remaining larger lot that's available on the south side. Yeah, there might be one or two others that are close, but as far as Greenfield goes, this is about it. It's on 32nd Street, adjacent to an existing neighborhood that was platted quite some time ago. And it's a fairly straightforward development. There's in the northwest portion of the parcel, there's some trees up there. There's a little bit of a slope, kind of a grade going through the property. So that's one of the things that I had pointed out. You might want to talk about, what does that look like? What can be retained? What might need to be swapped out? But it's not something that's heavily wooded that you're going to be looking at how to figure out large scale tree replacement or something along those lines. So relatively straightforward. Utilities are available. I'll turn it over to the developer.
Great, thank you.
I'm Mike Bosgraf, about Homes' son Noah. And I always get scared when we show up, there's a lot of cars.
They're all playing pickleball. Don't worry about it.
You weren't here for me, but they weren't here. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna set it up. Kind of going old school because I never trust technology. I thought I'd kind of take you through the property just from the beginning and the yard thought process on it. And
Shift this in your direction, but it's over.
You're
good.
We're good, yeah.
So this property has been owned for longer than any of us have been around by the Henry Walters Trust. It was a wildflower farm since the beginning. We bought several parcels from them. We bought another parcel right around the way in Lake Town that we're also developing. That was also a wildflower farm. Basically, they've been surrounded by water and sewer, and surrounded by other subdivisions over the last 50 to 60 years. And they're into their kind of their last generation that's going to farm. They're in their 60s and they've decided they no longer, it's not feasible anymore. They have a couple invasive species that are weed species that are going through and they can't spray like they used to be able to because of regulations. And so the farms aren't really working anymore. So actually, while we were working on this, Henry actually passed away. He was in his 90s. And so the trust sold it to us last month. I'll give you kind of a bearing of what this looks like. This is 32nd Street. Park Church is here. This is a consumer's consumer's property. Literally, they own this property. There's a resident here and there's a resident here. And then this is a large parcel that goes down to the creek, and then the homeowner owns is off Old Orchard there. So it's surrounded by, a couple parcels. This is actually bordered by consumers' property here. What I highlighted in orange is kind of the tree canopy, just to show you that there isn't any trees here. It's been farmed. There's a little bit of a tree canopy here. I'm sure there's a couple trees in here. We haven't really done a tree study yet. A little bit through here and then right on the edge here. These are existing trees on 32nd Street. The property all rolls kind of this direction. And there's an existing pond here for sprinkling that they used for this. And then we have had a wetland study, and the only wetlands is this little green spot here. We've also had an environmental phase 1, and there's no environmental impact on the property. So very little wetlands, no environmental, very little trees. What we're proposing to do is is go through the PUD ordinance. We're already there on zoning. If we do our calculations, we're entitled to roughly 33 home sites. We're proposing 32 home sites. As part of that PUD, there's some wetlands, or not wetlands, there's some green space that gets dedicated, and I'll show you that. And then we get a few give and takes. We're asking for a little bit smaller home sites to allow for that green space. They're 85-foot home sites, which we build best on 85-foot wide home sites. They don't look like we accidentally missed a house in between houses. All of our houses are designed at about 43 to 45 feet, and with a 12-foot third stall garage, 10-foot setbacks, it seems to work best on an 85-foot home site. And so this is typically what we see out there. What we would propose is that we do private streets through here. So these would both be private. We are proposing a common area with a pool, sun deck, viewing platform over this area, which is actually a retention area. It's where we do all of our retention. We would plant it with a wild grass. It's the same wild seed mix that you're seeing on the side of the expressways, M6 and some of the newer planting areas. It basically grows not quite as high as the old grass they used to plant, and it kind of does a swaying grade. You can still mow it, but it doesn't need to be mowed. We would do that area here. There is a tree preservation area that you'll see in your packet that we proposed along the edge here. We did not propose one here because there's consumers here, and there's a pretty big barrier between that and here. To get into some of this, I'm a little concerned that by the time we get through Prime Newhoff and your engineers and what they're going to require for storm drainage, I can't guarantee that we're not going to get into some of this because they're probably going to require us to put storm drains in the backyards. So I haven't gotten that far yet. So we would propose basically probably a heavy buffer zone here to this house, a buffer zone probably around this home here, maintaining as much trees here as we can. They'd be in the backyard of these sites anyways. And then we're probably adding more trees than would be required, just because I think at this point, there's no trees on the site and trees can sell property. So we'd probably put two trees in the requirements per home site to go in the front yard. And then probably a heavily buffered berm and tree area complementing the existing trees if they can be maintained, and then additional trees through there. There is a question about public street versus private street. Our desire is to have a private street. Primarily, a private street allows us to do a different radius. Basically, think of a public street as engineers are laying it out. Private street, we get to have to be a little more creative. Public street, if we're afraid if we go to a public street, by the time we get through the approval, this is going to be a thoroughfare through here, and then we're going to have probably a 90 going here, and it's something I would rather not do. There's not a whole lot of advantage in your ordinance between private and public either way. They're not significantly different in the way they're built. They're not. It's simply the layout of the radiuses. Both are going to meet fire protection. Both are going to make. We'll get fire sign off on any kind of cul-de-sac or radius or street design there. I think private street within the PUD changes the amount of land we have to set aside here for detention, and that's probably the only other significant change. So the significance between private and public is simply, in my opinion, is design.
Aesthetics.
What's that?
Aesthetics.
Aesthetics.
Yeah.
It's, and I think, within the PUD, I guess I'm kind of appealing to the PUD of saying, you keep passing ordinances that take all the fun out of the PUD, as far as free overlays and free ordinances and, all this. It used to be we had a lot more design creativity and give and take. At this point, I'd still like to have a little give and take and say, the give and take will allow us to, have a little more pleasing streetscape. And, in return, I'm happy to add a bunch of trees there because trees sell. What I don't want to start doing is adding, too many trees in the back where they, don't matter. And, we start adding a couple $1,000s, which adds $10,000, to the price of the house, and it just keeps going that way. So I'd rather put trees where they really sell, which is going to be in the front of your yard, is kind of where they need to be right now, or along 32nd. Yeah.
You mentioned that you hadn't done any type of an analysis or an inventory to see what's in there currently, right?
We haven't.
No, and that's okay. This is preliminary. I'm just
from we've surveyed the property. But I can't say we've marked trees or done anything, except we know that there's from a satellite image, where the canopy is.
Sure.
I doubt the canopy is out this far, but it's, or I'm sorry, the tree is out that far, but the canopy might be.
I have a comment and a question. When I first pulled out the plan and looked at it, and I thought, oh my gosh, these trees are really interesting the way they're laying it out. So I really appreciate the way you're doing that. I think you created a really nice plan. I really like that a lot. The question that I have is, let's see, what was this? Well, another comment. So then if it's a private street, that means that snow removal and maintenance, all that stuff is going to be on the association to maintain.
There will be, we've got open space. It's going to be a full on,
it's pretty
association, site condominium association.
Yeah.
They're going to take care of snow removal. They're going to take care of the pool within that.
Okay.
The open space.
I know the other question was, we talk a lot about affordable housing. What price point are these going to be at? I'm just kind of curious.
There's nothing affordable, but
exactly.
By the time So the best way to look at this is, my home sites typically need to be about 16 to 20% of the price of the house. So it's when you start seeing $100,000 home sites out there, the house automatically almost needs to be 500,000. These are probably getting up to 130 grand. Road costs went from, even let's say 15 years ago, we were at $225 a foot, lineal foot. We are approaching $2,000 a foot right now, a lineal foot. So it does become real numbers when you start talking about width of street, when you start talking that, because again, we take everything you add on to that home site, almost times it by 5 to get to that end price of the house. So we're probably at 5 to 6, $700,000 houses.
Okay.
Now, the good news is, you've heard it before, is at this point, I believe any house we build, we start pulling people along that string. And so we might pull somebody out of a less expensive house into a more expensive house. We open up that less expensive house. But we're a long ways from being able to provide affordable housing.
Yeah, my quick,
In that 5 to 700, what's the square footage?
I would say our average house is between 24 and 2,600 on a 2-story. And we have a ranch design we probably put in here that starts at about 1,800. And so ranch design's 18 to 2,200.
Above ground, right? Above ground?
Yes.
All above ground, yeah.
yeah, I had the same question that you had actually with price point, especially with seeing how much you wanted to, minimize the size of the lots based on
Right.
all the setbacks you're asking for. I kind of chuckled and was like, I thought this was gonna be affordable housing units going in here, and that ain't anywhere near. We have a goal to.
I could probably kind of minimize this townhome this and get it to, let's just say 7 to 9 units an acre. And we'd still be about $400,000. We have a project actually in Park Township. There was a fire emergency there today. And gas leak. And we're about 400,000 there in Park Township with confidence.
That the one on First Street?
Yes.
I'm listening, no, I'm trying to figure out whose mic's whistling, but it seems to have stopped.
That's the beginning.
You mentioned the landscape berm along 32nd Street,
Yes.
but now that property kind of drops off from 32nd Street. So how you gonna burn that? How much of the backyard of those lots are gonna get eaten up with that?
Enough. Yeah. It's this is 50 feet right here. So this line right here is 50 feet. So I do have some space.
Yeah, all right.
It might not be as high up.
Yeah, just looking at that, I didn't quite get the scale. It looks like just a thin strip going down there.
Yeah.
Okay, 50 feet, that's pretty significant.
And kind of why I said I don't know about these trees is I don't know what the road commission's gonna do for XL, decel lanes or anything like that, or, when we get into utilities with it.
And then I actually drove out the other day and like at the west end there's lots, what was it, 6, 7, 8? Where the tree line recedes down to the property line there.
Yeah.
Consumers actually.
Yeah,
they're there too, and it's like.
Yeah.
I would like to see, and I think the homeowners probably like to see something to fill in that gap. Cause when they go clear that out, it just leaves a mess and it looks like crap.
Yeah.
But they don't care, their lines are clear.
I'll add to that, so everybody knows that they also took all the west limbs of the trees on your side of the property line that border that clear cut that goes all the way to Jerome.
Right.
Yeah.
Not Jerome, next street back, yeah.
That's that.
Yeah,
the
but
utility-
it angles in
utility.
and actually comes right up against the property there, and they cleared a nice gap in there for you.
But what they created is a wall that a wind can really damage.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So hang on to everything you got there.
Yeah.
I saw a 26 foot wide roadway. How do you, on a private street, how do you come up with that? Is that fire? Is it-
No, actually, so cobblestone in the city is a 20-foot road. So, roads depending on township, city, they change all over the place. Typically, a fire truck needs 9 feet. So 2 fire trucks technically can pass on 18. 26 is a pretty good sized road.
That's pretty generous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's over generous, but that's my opinion.
Well, I take it down.
I was gonna comment this question in a different way. What is the speed max you want in your housing, development?
Well, there's no public here, so,
You are on video, which is.
oh.
You're in session.
Great up. And I'm gonna bring it up because I don't want to play a lot of games. There is one way I can solve, the public street and the private road that I contemplated, but we thought we'd get through this meeting before I try that. Is Jerome, I can take 2 splits here without approval and take an easement for utilities. Basically, the utilities come through here and here. So I could take an easement, take 2 splits here. On a private road, I can still get 31 home sites for fire protection and your ordinance. So I could stop this before Jerome Street by taking those splits. I just don't want to play a lot of games without you knowing it. So if you're uncomfortable with the pass through, I'd prefer not to have a pass through. I'm uncomfortable with a public street that looks like a thoroughfare that automatically goes to Jerome Street, and then I have to fix up Jerome Street, and then I got all these neighbors who are going to come after me and say, now I got a thoroughfare. So it might not be a bad idea to have me take those 2 splits, and it basically looks like this with a cul-de-sac here, and I can still get the same amount of home sites and basically the same layout. We came up with that idea after we submitted.
Not a bad idea.
That's why it's preliminary.
My question is really about controlling speed, not how wide can you get the road, especially with the fact, well, when you got a bike path on 32nd.
Yes.
So you'll have bike traffic coming down. Kids will be going down the sidewalk to go to that pool.
Yes.
26-foot wide road does not, people will drive as fast as the road will allow them to, not what the sign says. That's why I'm asking them, what's the maximum speed you want to be signed to? Because I think that's, personal opinion, I think that road's too wide for that location.
Dan, I think that he's probably getting that number from our ordinance, our private road ordinance has those specific numbers in it. So I think that's where that comes from. Yeah, we would have to get the fire chief on board with that, but I mean, I love narrower roads. I'm up for that conversation, but it's not something I think we've talked about here before.
We do have sidewalks proposed. To answer your street or your question, I can't really regulate speed. I certainly can on a public road. On a private road, I guess I could post it, but it's our road. Design probably has the most to do with it, and narrow streets does reduce it. Our biggest complaint isn't the person you think, it's the soccer mom and minivan, running down that street, and it's not the kids, it's not somebody else, it's an adult rushing to sporting goods. That's usually where we get a complaint.
I have a question. Sustainability is a word that's really important to us in Park Township, and that can mean a lot of different things. And I'm thinking of 2 things. One is always, the materials that are being used in the houses, and how much is recycled and just all of that kind of stuff. But I think the bigger question, and is there a market in Park Township, West Michigan, for more sustainable sites?
And that would basically be, not everybody has a full front lawn with a sprinkler and all the waters and fertilizer and everything. Is there a market? I'd love to see. I've seen them in other states where everything is arranged where there's open prairies and flowers and just very limited areas of water.
Look at Bay Meadows Cottages.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that?
Oh, very
We did that project back in the 80s and 90s. It can't be done again with your regulations.
With the regulations? Like what regulations?
Slopes, basically putting storm retention into all these different ponds. The engineers have gotten control of design, and Prime Newhoff has gotten control of design.
Yeah.
No offense, but the creativity for what you want to do is pretty much out the window.
I was thinking probably more prairie as opposed to
Prairie
like
grasses,
ponds.
and that's why I mentioned that one, is that
Yeah.
it's a lot of prairie grasses, and stormwater is broken up into these little channels that go around the condominiums, and it works out fantastic. It's very hard to do nowadays because it got regulated. And I'm not trying to preach.
No, I'm just waiting to see one of these days when somebody comes in and I'll stand up and I'll say, I'll buy the first unit. That's pretty amazing.
I think that's a valid point. I don't know if this is the right one, because again, the home sites are almost too large for doing anything overly creative.
I was thinking that as well. There is a lot of property, so it may not be the right site, but maybe on another site someday we'll see it.
This site in front of me, so I'm not pandering, but yeah, I think that works out well in a condominium project, where if you could offer the developers some flexibility, probably the next condominium, they don't like maintenance anyways.
Right.
They don't have playgrounds, they don't have parks, they don't,
Right.
They hardly like to maintain their grass. So
that
would be a great place to push that agenda. I'll remember that next time I bring on a project.
You mentioned, Len, you mentioned materials as being one of the first things. We had talked about lead, trying to start looking at some lead standards and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about how you're looking at those today in terms of residential? Sorry, lead standard. Yeah.
Yes. There's a so Michigan is still not adopted the 2021 energy code, and it just went to court, and it's still not adopted.
Okay.
That energy code actually takes, and the home builders is actually in favor of it, but Lara wants to jump past it for some energy things on a prescriptive manner. It's a little complicated, but they should adopt the 21. The 21 basically brings energy efficiency almost to all the LEED standards. And homes are getting extremely energy efficient.
Yeah.
And with the 2021 code, it changes all the furnaces to 2-stage furnaces. It changes attic insulation to, I believe, R40 or 50. It just really pumps everything up. Pretty much everybody's there already. It changes a lot of electrical stuff and a few other things.
One other question I had was, we've got, so you talked a little bit about the retention area. I think you've got that defined as proposed bioretention. I think you talked a little bit about some using wild grasses and some other things in there. Is that part of what's being considered as open space, or can you talk a little bit about what you're doing from an open space?
This is what we're proposing as open space.
Okay.
According to your ordinance. And this area here is by and large retention. So if we go past retention and we go into a pond, according to your ordinance, it changes a bunch of things. And we now have to be 75 feet off the lot line unless we get permission from the neighbors. Not wanting to necessarily go talk to the neighbors about trying to get permission at this point, we're proposing retention, which can go to 25 feet.
Okay.
Retention actually, handles more water than, I'm sorry, retention.
Retention. We've had this conversation before.
So, you're not absorbing much into the water anyway. So if we stop before the water level and we're at retention, this will be dry most 99% of the time except in the rain.
Have you ever considered talking to ODC about how to make that detention, retention indentation prettier than just grass? I mean, they have a lot of ideas and free help that will come out.
ODC.
Outdoor
Yeah, we have to. We have mixed in wildflower mixes, we've mixed in, we can mix in trees, we can mix in, quite a bit of stuff in there. I think we're open to the discussion. I don't believe it changes our calculations.
No, I don't. I'm just thinking of a very large space that looks like an overgrown.
Yes.
Lawn. One thing when I noticed when I was out there is that farm trail that goes around the edges, especially around that east side, is a dog walking trail. There was a parade. So the first thing I ask is where the green space ends before it comes out to the 32nd Street. There must be a reason for that, I assume.
Not probably a good one.
Now,
not probably a good one. And I think at some point the engineer, there's probably some calculation why you stopped there, but what are you getting at?
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is a through walk from, especially if that's the design, a through walk. And there's a green space and connects to the bike path on your side on 32nd, and they come down and it maintains that amenity that they're going to lose if they get some blocks cut off.
Yeah, I'd probably rather concentrate on sidewalks, that they can get there. And if we're talking about trying to use this differently, maybe trying to stay more in this area. I'm not sure how Denny Owens and family is going to like, the walkway.
They're people. I mean, it's today it's just tractor ruts instead of bad, but I'm just trying to get
That's thick trees and
Yeah.
You'll never know.
Yeah, you've got quite a few trees already there in that area, so.
Trees along the Element side are almost all red oak, which is a good thing for birds and other. The bad thing, there's a oak wilt, which seems to be going around. Another comment I saw on lot 3. There are 2 specimen trees that I want to make sure you see when you your site plan. There's a sugar maple and a red oak, 2 plain old natural trees. But they're specimens, and by that I mean they're older than all of us here. They grew up without other trees crowding them. And they're just gorgeous.
Okay.
But I worry that they're in the footprint of where you want to build a house.
What were they? No, can you write that down?
Yeah, I got lot 3. And on lot 1, there's 3 red oaks, all in that. You talk,
Cluster down there.
when you talk in there, there's 3 way up above the rest of the canopy. Okay, so just
Is it sugar maple and red oak?
Sugar maple and red oak
Yeah.
got three red oaks on 1. And
So those might not be fair game for taking down.
If it's
Those might
possible.
not be fair game for removal.
Well, unless you can't build on it, if you
Right.
don't. I mean,
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
Tree cells sometimes are in the wrong spot. They're also expensive to take big trees down. So,
Yeah,
people
sure
buy
is.
sites for the trees. So we'll do an inventory and see where they are. If we can keep them, we'd love to keep them. And also, your engineers have to allow us to.
Right. Keeping them's cheaper than replacing them if you can. All right.
Let's go back to the road here a second. I know the main in and out, the only in and out, depending upon what you decide on, is going right into the church. Is there anything needing to be done so that we don't have constant, and maybe it's up to the church to put their own berm in or what have you, but and maybe that's also part of having a private road that you don't have to meet up with their driveway. I kind of just thinking out loud here.
We haven't gotten to that point yet with the road commission, so basically whatever you approve, we still is subject to the road commission where they want us. And I believe we talked to them, and I think we have some kind of thought process, but
I have run it through past the road commission. We are in conversation just as far as very preliminary, hey, take a look at this. So we don't get way down the road and then say you have to make a major plan. And that wasn't something that they commented on, but they will have to approve wherever that location is.
how do you feel about stopping the road from going to Jerome?
I don't know, is there any issue with one road in and out of a pretty big development?
There is a little bit of a safety issue there, and I'd probably want to talk it over with the fire chief. I don't know that it hits the threshold where you say you really have to have that, but it is preferable. And I would also think I can see pros and cons to it. I haven't had a chance to think about it, obviously. But I would also say consider non-motorized access if you decide that you'd like that not to be a roadway. Think about if that's an area that would be good to put in some kind of easement or path that would go through that, so you could make that more accessible. Right, you could have walkway in a road as an option.
We have actually on the same ownership, literally right around the corner on 64th Street, same size, actually same amount of home sites on the same property, and we have, I believe, 31 or 32 home sites, and we have an emergency access going out to Bluebird. We know we're clear with the International Fire Code for 31 home sites. There's a provision in every ordinance that is subject to the fire chief's approval.
Right.
So he has a lot of swing.
I would think if you were a homeowner and you were headed to South Shore Drive, you'd appreciate that end was open. But if I just don't know what the normal traffic patterns or traffic counts would be.
Yeah, 31 home sites is not a lot of home sites, so I don't think you're going to have a lot of traffic. I think the bigger concern for me, from a sales standpoint, is you have the ability, if you did do the ability to cul-de-sac, you have very little through traffic to worry about with the kids and everything else.
Right.
But also selfishly, when we get a public hearing, and everybody starts showing up from Jerome Street and they start seeing that everybody's going to take a shortcut home.
Right.
Then I think these two people wake up.
Might want to see 2 exits on 32nd if you were to do that.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Then I'd rather just go through the Jerome Street.
Through the Jerome, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how. No, they might. Ottawa County didn't say anything about it.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit. They're like, eh.
Yeah, that cul-de-sac becomes a roundabout then. That's not what you want either. Anybody else have anything additional that they want to ask or provide input?
Good concept.
Yeah.
I like the direction.
I think the big direction is if you could give me a little feedback. Or if I'm pushing it, on the Jerome Street, because that's a, plan revision that we probably ought to do prior to showing up again.
Mhm.
The tree stuff, we could probably have a conversation at the next time and I can be prepared for it. The other comments I can be prepared for, but I can't probably be prepared for it.
Just
by the way, let's punch this through or don't punch this through.
right. Just so we're all clear, could you just I mean, I'm a little fuzzy on what that split's gonna look like. Can you just kind of walk us through that so everybody's clear on it? We're good at preparing when we have stuff to look at ahead of time, but have to get better at flipping.
So, it just so happens that I have enough space here to do legal splits. I think it might be 90 feet. I know we looked at it. I believe I have 90 feet and enough depth to do 2 splits here. I can still take, a sewer line and go through here, wherever I have to go to get that sewer line with an easement. But I can take A and B as legal splits outside of, what I guess you have control over, which would leave me with legal property, basically the square. Once I do that, you can't really force me to get through here because it's not part of this PUD process. That's why I kind of, trying to bring it to you. I didn't want to get shady and do this ahead of time and say, oh, I no longer own this, so therefore this is what you get to do. Then we'd probably take this and put a legal cul-de-sac here, and you probably, have something that, goes like that.
So you have the same number of lots.
Same number, I would have 30 home sites here. And I'd have 2 here, so it's
32 outside.
I have 32 now, I'd have 32 at the end of the day.
But they would be on Jerome.
Actually, I think I drew this wrong. These are 2 sites here. This is a house.
Right.
So.
Okay.
We
have 1 on Jerome. Outside.
I'd have 2 on Jerome. I know I have like 180, 200 feet on Jerome.
Okay.
We have had that before, and usually that happens, when we've had that happen in the past, it's been before it comes to planning commission. The big issue that I see with it, with doing it ahead of time is that in the past, we've run into issues with utilities and easements and that sort of thing that are then outside of that. And, it's not one of the situations, you don't want your water engineer to have headaches. Some of the other ones maybe sometimes, but not, you want your water system to be clean and to be able to move quickly and well, so.
Yeah, I think we would propose to, I think it's 2 processes, but they can be done at the same time. Obviously, we don't want to encumber ourselves and not have sewer or get into a problem with the fire chief. Somebody else.
So it sounds like going with the plan as presented is probably where we want to be on this one.
Do we need input from Chief Gandy at all, or?
We will get input from Chief Gamby. I had given him the plans and he just hadn't had a chance to give feedback on it yet. So I think that you can offer your opinions on what you see right now, the feedback that they're asking for. I'll also be in communication with them on what the chief says, and we can bring that back here too, if that's something that you want to talk about more.
I would imagine we will talk to the chief before we get too far along.
Yeah.
We don't want to present a plan that's going to be subject to the chief, and then the chief comes back and doesn't know. So I think Nick and I and the fire chief could get that one worked out. I think
That's good.
my opinion, the question is, would you rather see me come back with a plan that looks like this or looks like the original?
So you're gonna have less resistance from neighbors if you do something like this, probably, right?
If I do this, I have a solid argument with you for private roads. I have a better argument for private roads. And I think I have less neighborhood opposition.
That's kind of the way it feels to me too.
I think just thinking about it, you mentioned it, you know, having the two cul-de-sacs and not having through traffic would be nicer, for prospective families. Just so we can get, you know, afford to buy houses in the neighborhood.
It's a community diversity something, you know, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, going through, we're breaking it up as best we can. If we break it down, we have one entranceway, one signage, one, you know, people are gonna say they live at, you know, Fox Club Estates. And I think it's a, you know, old school community like we did at Bay Meadows or something like that. By the way, Bay Meadows has one entranceway.
One way in, one way out.
A lot of them do. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It's a lot bigger.
I think I like the layout of what you were proposing better. If I were a resident in that neighborhood, I would like to have the two ways of getting in and out. I think that'd be really nice. So I think if I lived in the neighborhood, I would like that plan. The other plan, you may have resistance from the neighbors. So, yeah. So
Have you driven through there?
I have not driven through Jerome.
Okay, because I mean, I drove around and going out to Jerome, it's not really very convenient. I mean, then you've got to go through other roads to get to South Shore or.
Yeah. It's no faster or.
Yeah, I think they.
I don't think fair is going to help our residents at all. It's maybe gonna help the people on Jerome Street and then there get home faster. But at the same time, they're going to complain about now they have a thoroughfare of everybody going through there.
Jerome, don't you have to go down ways and then jog out to South Shore?
I personally live in a no outlet community and I love it.
Well, I think I have good direction.
Good. Good. I'm good. You guys good? Yep.
We're good.
Okay. You good? Yep.
Good.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'll say one more comment, I like your selections.
You like the tree selections? You're one of the first ones. The last plan I think I presented, I got yelled at about all the bad trees. It's everybody has an opinion on the trees, and you know, the architect are getting it wrong, I think. But this actually came from my landscaper who made the suggestions.
Good.
The last one was the architect.
Very good.
All right. Thank you.
When did we kill the this?
Yeah, I know. Well, we're gonna have a conversation about
We had to go out and do the
reuse
packet.
and environmental
Special for the packet.
environmental stewardship and paper. Yeah. All right. Thank you. That was hopefully that was helpful for you. It was helpful for us. Good, thanks. Zoning ordinance amendment is the next thing on our agenda. Mika, take us through that.
Take us through this, yeah. So this one's a wild card for you guys because you haven't seen it before. And this one is being presented on legal advice, and it's not Dan. We're working with a different attorney on a particular lawsuit that we're part of. Some years ago, there was a change to the zoning code to allow old barns to be used part-time as part of an accessory to an ongoing farming operation as boat storage. Now, it's something that's been done a lot in the area over the years. Some issues with it. It introduces a commercial use into an agricultural area. It gives our building official hives because it's just about impossible to upgrade an agricultural building into something that's actually usable for boat storage. And there are some legal issues that have come up with it as well. And so that's why it's being presented to you as this request to say, no, any existing approved, and there are some, but anything that's existing currently, that can continue to be used. But we have also seen some abuse of it where people are appearing to build buildings for for a storage purpose and say, well, I'm just gonna farm for 5 years and then I'm gonna rent this out for storage. And that wasn't the original intent of the ordinance either. So what this would do is just repeal that. It would allow people who are currently operating in that way to continue operating, but it wouldn't allow new operations to begin.
Have we identified the ones that are operating and will continue?
We know at least one for sure. I don't know that. Maybe we should take a poll, so we know what ones they are. But yeah, we know a couple that are operating. We know one that's operating. I'm not sure if there are others that are out there.
You may hear from them if this goes through.
We may.
Of course.
So don't they do a lot of boat storage at the fairgrounds here?
They do some, and this doesn't affect the fairgrounds.
Okay.
I can't tell you why. Ask Dan. Not that Dan.
So according to this, there's supposed to be a public hearing on this. At least that's the way the agenda reads.
Yes. You are correct. Thank you for catching. You did notice it. Yes.
Okay.
Weeks ago.
Public hearing?
So we've noticed it. Do we need to open and close the public hearing?
Close the public hearing, yes.
Okay,
Make a motion.
yeah, but I'll go ahead and make a motion to open the public hearing.
Support.
All in favor? All opposed? Okay.
I'll make a motion to close it.
All in favor? All opposed?
I think we're done.
There's no public, so. Good.
The formalities.
Yes. All right, so is there anything that we need to? You're providing guidance on that? Do we have to vote on this or?
You do have to vote on this.
Okay.
Yep, yeah, and this will, as any ordinance, go to the board, so this is a recommendation to the board.
So does this prevent somebody from building a commercial building and using it for storage?
Yes.
Even on commercial
Oh,
property?
not a commercial property, no, so this is specific to the R1 district, agricultural district, correct, yeah.
Right.
Yes, so commercial property is unaffected.
All right, clear. Good.
What does Holland Township do?
I have no idea, I can find out, but not this week.
I can say I'm a little disappointed to have this on the agenda the week after we talked about how much we need to help farm economies get profitable.
Yeah.
The first thing we do is get rid of an ordinance, or draft an ordinance that allows them to do something to make a little money during the off season. That just seems disappointing.
I understand what you're saying. It sounds like there's a recommendation from a legal perspective that we should make this change. And I printed what I have, but I don't actually have the ordinance here.
This is,
You guys have copies of it? This is it.
Yeah.
Okay, so all we're doing.
Yeah, this is just the
Mhm.
motion to rescind it, right?
It is, yep,
That's all there is. That's all it is.
It's
Okay.
not the
there's
actual-
no additional
It's
text.
not the actual.
Okay.
Yeah,
so if this isn't pressing,
it's
It is pressing.
pressing.
it is.
So it sounds like,
But the fact that it's pressing, I mean, you are an independent body that has,
Well,
The
I was
ability to
just
make that
saying, I'd
decision.
like to hear, oh, Dan didn't make the recommendation.
no, we're working with a different firm for this
okay,
item.
So,
So why is it pressing?
yeah, I would like to hear why it's,
Why is it problematic?
Because of a lawsuit that we're engaged in right now.
Ah, there we go. Now we know something.
No, I get it.
yeah.
and so that's gives us no time to see what our township is going. Not that matters, like, not that we have to mimic and
It is,
benchmark what they do, but.
so not that this is relevant to the rest of the planning commission, but this does go to the board after this. So it's a recommendation to the board. So if that were something that you wanted to see, what do other municipalities do before moving forward with it, that's something that I could pull together for the board. And if you would like to say, no, we're not interested in moving this forward, you can recommend that as well. It does, I mean, your recommendation goes to the board either way, but
Well,
If you say you don't think that this is well advised, that's still an option for you, but that is the advice of legal counsel is that we go through with it.
Yeah, if there's been legal advice for a current situation, it's probably in our best interest to follow their advice.
Yeah.
Rather than get into another legal situation over the same thing with somebody else.
Okay.
I would like to avoid lawsuits.
Yeah, it's always good. Yeah.
I think we should learn from incidences like this and how do we keep ourselves as clean as possible.
Yeah.
That said, we're not helping our farmers any.
Agreed.
Yeah, our existing farmers that are doing this, again, are covered under the existing.
If they already have it in place. Right.
Okay.
But this keeps from any new ones being put in place.
Yeah.
Okay.
On ag property.
On ag property. Yep.
I think the advice of legal counsel is sound. I also see a plethora of zoning board of appeals applications that if we start to be loose with our ordinance, especially in the ag area. So I would support legal counsel's opinion.
Any further discussion? And if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to repeal the boat storage portion of the zoning ordinance.
I'll second.
Second. Support.
And this is a recommendation to the board, so.
Recommend to the board.
Recommend to the board.
Yeah. Any further discussion? If not, we'll take a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. All right. Other business and announcements. Dennis, what's happening in the zoning world?
I'm happy to report that we had 2 applications from residents who have non-conforming lots and seeking minimal relief from side yard setbacks. Both had very good reasons why. They want to live in their old age and they were very solid reasons why. So after consideration, we approved both requested variances.
Okay, great. Sure. What do you have from the board?
My apologies, I did not prepare my little report that I normally do, so. I really don't have anything to share today. We do lots of stuff. We got.
I've been to some meetings. There's a lot of stuff that gets done. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we do stuff.
We, so
Yeah.
I.
Verbal is fine.
Yeah, no, so we did have an individual, we are going to transfer some of Park Township property to. Makes total sense. We have no use for it. He's gonna pay $1,500 and it's like his driveway goes through 2 triangles of it. So it was a no-brainer to go ahead and sell that to him.
Nice.
Yeah. Everything else for it now.
What's happening with Parks and Recreation Director?
That is still, Mika probably knows more than I do. It's still an open rec and we're still interviewing.
Oh, okay.
I think it's on hold briefly, but not my understanding. I don't know that it's on hold for a long time, but I think there's at least a pause in the decision making right now.
And I don't know if it was because we just haven't gotten enough applicants or what.
I can't say more than that in an open meeting.
Okay, that's fine. More direction for the role was needing to be defined. So. Any other questions?
I think if that's what you've got, then that's what we've got. Dave, you and I talked, I don't think there was a farmland preservation
No meeting
meeting,
this
so
month.
there's nothing to report there. Any other new business announcements? Anything anybody would like to share? One thing I'll just pass along. We had the most recent housing webinar was on essentially bringing the public into the planning process, and it was really very good. And there was a lot of data that was shared during that, which we have the presentations. We can share those. They came out this week. We can send those out to everybody. I'd also suggest if you're interested in knowing what's going on in the state, the county, and more importantly here in Park Township, mihousingdata.org has got tremendous data on what's happening more broadly, but what's happening here. And it drills down using most recent census data. So it's pretty interesting. A lot of data on household size, what's changed over the last 10 to 15 years, what household makeup is. It's really interesting. And I think it shares the fact that what's changed is that we have a lot of people living in larger homes with smaller families. So I think as we start to think about how that looks in the future and what types of things we might want to try to encourage, that's something to think about as well. But it's a great source. So with that, I'd look for a motion to adjourn. All in favor? None opposed? Steph, we made it.